Welcome back to our daily show. Here's CJ.
Oh, 9:21. Welcome back. A little bit of change on this Friday morning. Tom Emery, it's been a while. How are we doing, sir?
How you doing, CJ? Good to be back.
Well, and good to have you back. I am really excited to talk about this and really celebrating the state of Illinois' historic women from so many different occupations. Tom, this has got to be exciting for you.
It really is. This is a book that it's actually second edition for me. I've done a smaller version in 2018, and it was really one of the most interesting and rewarding projects I'd ever done. It ended up being one of my hottest speaking programs. I got an awful lot of bookings for speaking around the state on that particular book, and I wanted to expand on it. So I've actually doubled the size of the book, and that brought us here today, where I profile 50 of the top women in Illinois history in a variety of occupations, everything from athletes to library leaders to actresses, politicians, writers. My reviewers have told me I've got a really, really good cross-section on this, and it's just been a really ton of fun for me.
Well, and I think it's one of these pieces, too, just from my takeaway of reading a little bit on this, is, really there's always those women that we grew up with learning about in maybe our history books in middle school and high school, like Jane Addams, but to really dive a little bit deeper like you have and going through all of the different notable women, it's just incredible, and I think it really does bring a unique spotlight to something that is sometimes overlooked, not intentionally, but just because we get consumed in our day-to-day living in Illinois.
That's a good point you make, CJ. One of the reasons I wanted to do a book like this when I first conceived it several years ago was that there aren't that many really high-quality books on Illinois women's history. A few things have been done, but not as much as you think. And you made such a good point saying that we all remember Jane Addams from our high school history textbooks. But there are a lot of stories that never get told, and part of that's obviously sexism through the years, and which sits today, and no one denies that. But there's so many great stories. One of my favorites is Alta Mae Hewlett. She was the first licensed lawyer from the state of Illinois. She earned her law degree at the age of 19.
Wow.
Yeah. And at the age of 16, she'd actually written the first sex discrimination law in the nation.
Wow.
Now what makes Alta so sad is she died at the age of 23.
Wow. Well,
and one of my most favorite characters I've ever written about.
Well, and honestly, Tom, I mean, you say it, when you're discussing that too, and you're mentioning that, I think that's such an interesting point to make too. Is that some of these women, without books like this, might not ever have their story retold. I mean, it might be in a subchapter in the Library of Congress, but to really have this to where it can inspire younger women too, and individuals alike, it's not really a gender thing. I mean, there's so many stories here, Tom, just from reading the few names that I kind of went through during this prep work that fought adversity, mountains, and made them into these prosperous fields of gold. That's a success story that we all need to hear too.
Absolutely, because in my view, they're role models for men and women alike, without question. And I think a lot of people don't realize the level of condescension, oppression, criticism they endured is really hard to comprehend. There's no question that women struggle with a lot of things today, but the world was a much more infinitely male-dominant place 100, 150 years ago. These women were really the groundbreakers in their professions, in their fields. They endured remarkable criticism not only from men, but from other women as well. They had so many mountains to overcome, and I think that's what makes them inspiring.
Who was, as you were putting this second or this continuation together, was there an opportunity for you to, whenever you decided, hey, I'm going to do this, I don't want to say opportunity, was it surprising to you the amount of additional information, additional people that you could put in this book? Was that surprising at all for you, or was that one of those things that you knew was going to be a very quick thing to fill?
Well, I kind of had an idea for it, TJ, because I've written so many articles on women's history in the past. I've written dozens and dozens of them. So when I came up with the idea, I arbitrarily assigned number 50. I knew I could fill that one pretty well. I actually ended up writing 2 articles, especially for this book. Most of them are articles I've done for newspapers or other projects. One of the articles I did that especially for this book was on Bessie Coleman, the first black female who ever earned a pilot's license.
Wow. And
she was from the Chicago area, and she just inspired whites and blacks alike. She had a very short lifespan. She was only in the air for a few years before she was killed in a training accident in 1926.
Well, and whenever I hear about this too, Tom, it's amazing to hear the word first so many times for these Illinois women.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that to me is something, because, I hear first, and we hear first so many times now with news and things. It's like, oh, okay, but when you're saying first, I mean, it just shows you, I mean, the Rolodex of really notable feats and figures that are here.
It really does, and I think it's just for what they overcame because they had so much to deal with. They didn't have role models.
Right.
No one else was out there doing this before they were. And the gumption, the drive, the motivation, their focus. And I'll tell you something else, CJ. So many of these women were multi-talented. Ellen Hardin Woolworth was from Jacksonville, who co-founded the Daughters of the American Revolution. She was not only that, she was also a historic preservationist, a historic writer, historian, practicing scientist, and she was actually licensed to practice law. What'd you do this morning? I mean, think about it. It's really something the energy these women had was unbelievable.
Well, and that's what I wanted to ask you too. As you're right, as you were putting this together, right now my generation has a motivation issue. Not all the time, but some of us do when it comes to maybe barriers that are there, and not saying they're anywhere close to the same barriers, but just an obstacle. We don't need to name what the obstacle is. It's say obstacle 1. But when I'm reading about this, and I'm learning about these multifaceted women, it's amazing to me the determination and not just that, but I think more importantly, the grit that these women had to have to really achieve what they were doing.
Absolutely. Frances Willard, who was the face of the temperance movement, the anti-alcohol movement around the turn of the century, she died in 1898. Think about this, CJ. In a time when travel, period, was by horse, buggy, and train, she was traveling 30,000 miles a year, and at one point averaged 400 speaking engagements every year.
Wow.
Now, I've done 260 speaking engagements over the last 13 years. People tell me how much I speak.
And that's not
400 a year.
Right. That's not even half of her year.
Yeah, isn't that remarkable?
Well,
Willard's slogan was "Do everything."
So I have a couple of more people to ask you about here, and one of them I don't know too much about, but was starting to research it after I read your email, was Ruth Rhodey. Did I get this correct?
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
And now fill me in. She was America's first major female diplomat in what realm?
She was in Denmark. She was minister to Denmark, which is now an obsolete position. But Ruth Bryan Rhodey, for your listeners, went to Monticello College, taught there at one point as well. She was a daughter of William Jennings Bryan, which may be another name from your history textbooks. William Jennings Bryan was kind of a liberal icon of the turn of the century, 3-time presidential nominee, and also was the prosecutor in the famed Scopes monkey trial.
Really?
Yes. Yeah. Ruth, among other things, ended up being the first congresswoman from the Deep South because she served in the U.S. House in Florida, then served as U.S. Minister of Denmark from 1933 to 1936. And like I say, she became the first female major American diplomat.
That's just incredible. I mean, absolutely incredible. And another woman I was reading about in this email too, which I find just fascinating for our Alton tie-in, just for where we're at here station-wise, is Matilda Edwards. Can you fill me in?
Absolutely. Matilda Edwards grew up in Edwardsville and Upper Alton. She was the daughter of a prominent state senator. Among Lincoln scholars, there is debate whether Lincoln may have had an attraction or an infatuation with Matilda. She was the belle of every ball. She ended up moving to Springfield, was in with the Todd family, who was Lincoln married into. Mary Todd was his wife. Now, CJ, this is something I think is remarkable when I talk about this. Every guy wanted Matilda. I guess she was really something to look at, bright, intelligent, very conversational. She reportedly received 22 marriage proposals.
Oh, God.
Yeah, that's the reaction most people have. When I mentioned her in my lectures, 22, yeah.
Well, Tom, can I say...
She married a lawyer from Alton, Pennsylvania, and she died at the age of 29.
Well, you know what? At least a lot of those guys don't have to feel bad when she said no. The turn down rate was pretty high.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of guys out there fighting the same battle. They were losing it. You know?
I love this, Tom. Tom, getting back to whenever you're writing these books, I'm sure it's a good reflectionary piece for a point, too, in a way where, I'm sure you know of these individuals, but to really kind of peel back a different curtain while you're maybe gaining new perspectives has got to be really rewarding for you as well.
It is, and the strongest person in my life was a woman, my mother, Janice Emery. She nurtured my love of history, and I just owe everything to her. So I've had some inspiration based on that. But one of the fun things with history, and why people say history is boring, I have no idea. I don't know why anyone would say that. One of the reasons I do this, I love breaking new ground. I love telling stories that have never been told. These women, a lot of these stories have been scattered, pushed aside, passed aside. It's fun to bring these things to light because when I'm doing my lectures, when people email me or write me, tell me they never heard of this stuff, how much they enjoyed reading it. Well, that's great. That's one of the reasons I do this, and I've had a lot of people tell me I do that. And that really means something to me. Well.
And Tom, what I think so important too is it's really cool to see the amount of individuals in this book, and just the some that we've already kind of mentioned, but the term innovator and groundbreaker can be a common theme throughout this piece, and I think it brings a new perspective to maybe folks that have a different perception of achievements, maybe from early 1900s, the late 1800s, and how people really did get to that brass ring. And I think that that's so important, especially right now in this kind of fake society we're living in terms of social media, to take a step back and read about some of these individuals who didn't have that role model, like you said, who didn't have a rubric to follow. It was just them and their trust in themselves.
Right. They believed strong in themselves. This sounds funny, but the old adage, behind every good man, there's a good woman, that went both ways, because a lot of these women were married to very forward-thinking men who supported what they did, and that really helped their cause. These women had such drive, such determination. They knew what they wanted. They knew how hard they worked. They would have to work to get there.
Sorry.
No, please. I'm sorry. Go ahead, CJ. I'm sorry.
No. I just, you made such a good point there. And I always, because I'm a big John Adams guy, and I always think the relationship that him and his wife had was just so remarkable and progressive in the 1700s. But was there a perception or maybe just kind of a stereotype that was kind of cast upon the husbands of these women that were doing incredible things? Were they kind of considered a different branding or maybe a different category because, they were the supporter of their wife in a time that wasn't really heard of?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm certainly not saying that the husbands are the reason the wives made it.
Right. No, for sure.
But without question, the fact they had that, someone supporting them, someone encouraging them. And keep in mind, CJ, the era that they grew up in and lived in. Had they not had that, they might not be able to make it as far based on social norms and social expectations, because so many things were holding them back. The fact they achieved what they did is part of the remarkable story. But the idea they had such support among family, friends, what have you, I think that's part of their story, and it helped them get to where they were, and for that we're all grateful.
Well, absolutely. Tom, while I have you too, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about Catherine Harris before I let you go. And really, I think this would be this would be a great one to end on.
Please do. Catherine Harris is just one of the great people you meet in the world. She is the retired director of library services at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library Museum. She has been named Springfield's Illinois Citizen of the Year. She was just named the board chair of the Looking for Lincoln Coalition. Catherine Harris is a nationally known reenactor of such luminaries as Harriet Tubman. She just exudes class. She's just one of the great people you meet in the world. She's just someone you're proud to call a friend. She's one of my reviewers on this project, and I was happy to have her again. She's reviewed a number of my projects. I'm really thrilled about that. The other people reviewing this project are April Anderson Zorn, the University Archivist at Illinois State University, as well as Dr. Natasha Casey, who is a professor of communications at Lincoln Land Community College in Springfield. I was happy to have all three of those women, and of course, it's always an honor to work with Catherine.
And Tom, before I let you go, I'm so glad you gave me some time to talk about this today and just to have this chat. But what's the best way for us to get our hands on this book? I think this would be a great Christmas present, and not even just a Christmas gift, but a gift for ourselves. I mean, to really learn a little bit more about our state's history and the people that lived in it is always a good thing.
Well, thank you. The book sells for $29.95. That includes tax and postage. I can mail it anywhere in the lower 48. You can contact me at 217-854-3010, or my email is enjoyhistorytoday, which is all one word, no dots or underscores, enjoyhistorytoday@gmail.com.
Tom Emery, thank you so much for your time as always. Always a pleasure talking to you, sir.
It's great, CJ. Thank you for having me on.
No problem. 9:37, a little bit of change. We'll take a quick break. More Daily Show on this Friday morning continues after this.